The business of healthcare is hard, creating a badlands of terrain that is difficult to navigate. Some think the most brilliant minds in business are on Wall Street. They are wrong. The most brilliant minds are in healthcare. They have to be to thrive and survive. This podcast explores concepts in leadership, management, sales, and negotiation with those brilliant minds. The Healthcare Badlands Podcast is generally planned, but unscripted, unedited, and uncut, so you get the honest and unfiltered experience. Your host is Dr. Tom McDougall, a 30-year veteran of healthcare with 23 years of hospital CEO experience. His guests are carefully selected experts from across the industry. They offer insights, expertise, and some great real-life, often hilarious stories. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Welcome to the Healthcare Badlands Podcast. I'm very excited today. We have a interesting guest. Bob Lachance with REVA Global is with us, and we're going to go down some rabbit holes and talk a lot about virtual assistants. We're also going to talk some about the VA health system because he's got a lot of experience in some of those areas. So, Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to jump right in because I've got a burning question. And my burning question is from your bio. It talks about that you have been in the AI virtual assistance business for almost a decade. And I know most people didn't even think or talk about virtual assistants in healthcare until the last few years. So talk to me about how you've got so much experience in this space when for the industry, it's pretty new, but for you, it's not new.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually started a little over 20 years ago. That's when I first retired from professional hockey. I played there 8 years and had to get into an industry that kind of was a little bit the background of ice hockey. It's the sports atmosphere. So business was the next level for me. I jumped into real estate actually right after hockey. And then through the years, I started some education programs in the real estate space. And then in 2013, I was always looking for something that could help my students. And whether it was a product, a service, something out there. And then I got introduced to what a virtual assistant was back in 2013. And then a light bulb went on. I said, you know what? This is exactly what the industry needs. So at this time, it was real estate. So I started my first company in 2014. And then 2018, I launched my first medical company. And the reason why was because there's so many different pain points. You know, you have office staff that burns out. You have admin overhead keeps increasing. You have inefficient patient communication. And finally, the revenue cycles, they're very, very inefficient, which is lost revenue. So I looked at I really broke down what that looks like in a medical practice. And then I said, you know what? This is another great space to jump into to help doctors either save employee burnout and also increase revenue.
Okay. Very interesting. And we're coming back to the hockey. I didn't know that about you. I turned into a Tampa Bay Lightning fan.
They're the best. Yep, they're the best.
I was down in that market for a while, and I never really had been fully introduced to hockey, but that is an amazing game. But we're going to come back to that. Okay, so you started on the real estate side then with virtual assistants. So how did you design it initially in your application in that field?
So we design, first of all, the way we design everything is you start looking at a business. In real estate, we started looking at what departments are in each type of business. And it first started with marketing and branding, then it went to acquisition, and then it went to closing. So that's how we first started designing it. In the real estate education company that I helped create, also we had training and coaching behind the scenes. So I tied that training and coaching into the virtual assistant space, which never was like that. So we kind of blazed a path for that industry back, and this is 2014. So started blazing that industry. It worked. And now what we did is we started expanding, looking at other venues and avenues and businesses and say, hey, what other businesses are, they're having some challenges out there with the same things that real estate has. And medical came about. And we look at medical kind of the same way. If you look at every, I can't say every office, but probably about 98% of the offices have the same workflow. You have four phases. You have before the patient comes in the office or before the patient is seen. Second phase is when the patient's seen. Third phase is when they're at the office. The fourth phase is after. So if you break it down into four different phases, there's tasks within those phases that can be done outsourced, which, obviously the things that we just talked about, which is, burnout, admin overhead, inefficient patient communication, and revenue cycle. It all touches on all four of those potential challenges within an office.
Okay. And which of those phases did you tackle first?
First phase was before, and that was
Okay.
prior authorizations and scheduling. So we see that a lot of offices have challenges at the beginning because it automatically affects the revenue cycle. If you get the wrong information on the way in, sometimes it affects the end. So we go from end to end workflow. That's what we realized at the beginning, and then as soon as we've figured that piece out, we got a lot of inquiries about front desk management. So we have a lot of offices that hire us to take calls, triage, etc.
Okay. And are you taking an approach of augmenting existing staff so that you've got a front desk person now that may be answering the phone 10 times in an hour, and you're trying to have most of those calls initially answered by AI, and then just the ones that need additional assistance end up with the actual person?
Yeah, it's kind of a juggle of patient care and making sure that you fulfill everything. So what we do a lot of times is we look at each business and we ask questions like, how many calls do you get a day? How many patients do you see? The reason why we ask those first two questions is because if there are drop calls, that's potential missed patients and missed revenue. If there's drop calls as well, that means if there's a nurse or an office manager that is sitting in the front and patients come in and they also are doing a insurance verification or prior authorization, and they have to hang up the phone, or if they have the patient waiting, it affects obviously the patient experience as well.
Okay. And is your system, is it designed where it actually sounds and acts like a real person, or do you
Yeah.
have patients that get confused thinking they're speaking with a real person?
So on that side of it, those are real people. So we have our virtual assistants actually answering phones live and triaging calls. So on that side of it, we don't use AI for that. We use obviously real humans for that particular task.
Okay, that makes complete sense then. All right, so how have you decided what functions are going to be performed by a real person versus using technology?
Yeah. So we actually work with a lot of revenue cycle management companies because what we've realized is pretty interesting, and I know you're very familiar with that with one of the companies that are on your site as well. There's one of the bigger companies that we use that actually connected with us that said, "Hey Bob, we need a little bit of help because once it gets to the end, we're finding out that there's about 20% denials. And now what we're doing is we realized that when they use our service, they cut it down from 20%. Now it's down to 10% on those denials, which that 10% equates to a lot of money on some of those bigger companies. So that's where a virtual assistant can definitely play into some of those bigger companies, if you will, with the technology.
That's a, that's an interesting case study because that's 50% reduction in denials. So how does your system achieve that? Because that
It's
would be
just
very interesting to our listeners.
Yeah. So at the beginning, it starts first with obviously the prior authorization, right? So you have to get the right information in. What that company realized is that it's a human entering this information. And what happens is if they change jobs, they get married, they leave, they move from one state to another. There's a lot of those that were actually being denied. And also the information that was being put in by a live human at the beginning because they were overwhelmed or because they were overwhelmed or they were inputting the wrong information into a computer. So that's what was equating to a lot of those challenges up front. So they got our VAs involved in the upfront. The AI, what they would do is they would scrape everybody and find out who was denied at the beginning, give them over to our virtual assistants. Our virtual assistants would then call them and then make sure that all the information is correct, which helped in the end result into that 50%, if you will, denial rate.
Very interesting.
Yep. So I think we're going towards that route of AI and virtual assistants because of cost. I think we're in an interesting time because you start looking at from state to state to state. I know it costs a little different, but if you hire someone in office, I live in Connecticut and the cost of living is very, very high. So individuals need a high salary. So if you're hiring a nurse as an example, you're typically 70, 80, $90,000 for, one nurse. And sometimes they're doing these same tasks that a virtual assistant can do. And it just saves the office a lot of resources, a lot of money.
Well, and correct. And you don't have turnover with virtual assistants. You don't have days off. You don't have, family medical leave that they have to deal with. That's one of the number one things that, I see practices struggle with. Been doing some
Yeah.
consulting with a practice lately, and the revenue cycle is a mess. And the reason it's a mess is because they lost one of their key people. They thought that person was going to come back after 60 days, and then they decided not to return to work at all. And then it took them 3 months to get that person
Yeah.
replaced. So 150 days later, they had this big gap, and they're still trying to dig out of the accounts receivable hole that they got in.
Yeah, and the burnout is real, right? It's trying to
Sure.
find the individuals that want to work and come to the office every day. Since COVID, it seems to be, it doesn't matter what industry. I think I'm seeing it in a lot of different industries. Is people don't want to go in the office anymore. They feel like they could work from home and do the same job, but in the medical field, you need to be in the office.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. You got to have people present. And
Yep.
that is, that's a big challenge. When I was operating a hospital during COVID, we really struggled with that because a lot of people wanted to work from home. And I finally just put my foot down and said, nobody's working from home because we couldn't make a decision on who really could work from home versus who could not. When states were starting to lock stuff down, it was actually pretty comical because they said, you are not allowed to go to work unless you are non-essential. Are you only non-essentials would not go to the office? And I got just 1,000 questions from our team members about, am I non-essential? And I said, well, number one, you don't want to be non-essential because if it sounds like you're non-essential, that means we don't need you.
Right.
And number two, everyone in our organization is essential. So just draw the line. There's nobody that is going to be
So
in the
stop
non-essential
asking that question.
category. So we're all essential. So it was kind of an interesting discussion for sure. All right, so let's talk about where this goes, though, because I think that healthcare, and yes, I know you've got a very interesting background. My background's 30 plus years of healthcare,
Yeah.
and healthcare we're notoriously bad about not starting until we know where the end is.
Yeah.
So I want to know if I'm operating an organization, I'm making decisions today. I've got some idea what the organization looks like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So the
Mhm.
paralyzing factor for healthcare leaders is if I don't know what my organization looks like 10 years from now, I can't make a decision today about much of anything
Yep.
because I've got to prepare for what's going to be going on in a decade.
Uh-huh.
So, what is your take on this? So, AI and healthcare is very new. It's still evolving. People are still trying to figure it out. And I think we do have some paralysis in healthcare, evidenced by it's one of the slowest industries to adapt and
Mhm.
adopt AI solutions. So, where do you see AI and healthcare in 2035?
I think, there's going to be a really big mix of once they figure out the HIPAA compliance. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of the RCM companies that are going to start taking over, and it's going to create a lot of efficiency in offices. But I also see people have to realize that, and this is one of the biggest challenges. They look at AI and they say, "Oh, AI is so great," but somebody still has to run it. Someone has to pull those reports. Someone has to read it. You add AI into the RCMs as well from start to finish, because there's a lot of companies out there that try to do everything from start to finish. but there's gaps inside each different phase of those RCMs. So you got to figure out how you could plug those holes with human capital. I think that's where we're going to be. You're going to add in AI and software with plugging in human capital, because there's going to be some offices that still care about how the patients feel, right? When you check in, there's places like Quest Diagnostic right now that are just going automatically automated, where you type your information in before you go give blood. I personally don't like that feeling, but some people may, right? I think you're going to have a little bit of mix of both, and there's going to be some places that won't make that change because they still care about the patient communication, patient experience.
That makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
and healthcare is, I mean, if healthcare is anything at all, we are fiercely independent. We don't really care what everybody else is doing. We still want to do it our way. And we're stubborn as hell. I mean, you can go back to, hand washing wasn't a thing a century ago. And there's this, research study that shows that a OBGYN that was delivering babies figures out if he washes his hands in between deliveries, that it dramatically decreases complications for the baby and the mother post delivery. And that data was out there for like a decade before hardly anybody else in the healthcare industry said, hey, he may be onto something. I mean, a decade? I mean, that's insane. I mean, major medical breakthrough, one of the most significant breakthroughs in the history of modern medicine. And the entire industry was stubborn then, and we're still stubborn. My personal experience of all things is that hand washing, the greatest problem you have with hand washing among physicians is ER physicians. They should be the ones that are washing their hands to the point where the skin's falling off.
You would think, right?
But they don't. It's very interesting why they just don't slow down long enough to do that. But that's what worries me is I'm not bothered by healthcare being slow to adapt. I'm bothered by being paralyzed to adapt and missing opportunities. So that's what causes me the greatest concern.
Yeah, and everything goes fast, like you said. I mean, technology comes and it changes, and it's almost like that Best Buy commercial back in the day when, if you ever saw that commercial, you bought a new TV, and all of a sudden Best Buy drives by with a new truck with a new TV on it. So it's
Well,
kind
of
of the
course.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as you get the TV unpacked, it's obsolete. I mean, we all know that. This episode is sponsored by CO Management Solutions, a revenue cycle company you may not have heard of, but you need to hear this. There is little healthcare organizations can do about inflation-related expenses, but you can make sure you're collecting 100% of your revenue you have earned. CO uses AI and the latest technology paired with an efficient team to aggressively collect your hard-earned revenue at an attractive commission. Start today with a free analysis of what you are leaving uncollected and recover that revenue quick with CO. For more information, visit coms.com. That is SCIOMS.com.
That's right.
All right. So when a medical practice finds you, are they coming to you and saying, Bob, this is what we want to do? Or are they coming to you and saying, Bob, we have a problem. What can you do to help us? Which is your normal entry point?
Kind of both. It's literally cut down the middle. And we still go through the same process. We ask the first question. We ask discovery questions, like we said before. How many patients do you see per day? And there's reasons why we ask these questions, and they go to second level. How many calls you get per day? What we're looking for are metrics. So if we know how many inbound calls you get, then the next question is, do you track your missed calls? Because the tracking missed calls, if you realize, some of the offices that call us are, we have 15 missed calls a day. That's 15 potential new patients or 15 potential retention of patients. Because when you start looking at that, those are metrics. And then, we go over obviously how our virtual assistant can fill that role and what the end results are, right? Because if you look at a problem, there's always results that we want to help with, right? So if it's missed calls, it's saying, okay, how many new patients? if it's missed calls, who are missing these calls? So we always ask a question and we look for a result in the end. So that's what we do when we do our we call them like discovery calls or strategy sessions when new offices give us a call to see how we could best help them fulfill their bottleneck.
Okay. That is interesting. All right, let's switch gears to the VA health system
Okay.
because I found this very interesting as I was researching your company. You have a lot of penetration into the VA system. And it was surprising to me because of my bias. My bias is I would not consider the VA system to be innovative. That's not a adjective I would use when referring to the VA system.
Yeah.
But you've got a good bit of penetration in that area. So talk to us about what you're doing with the VA system and how that has developed over the years.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we know the VA system has to do with it's a federal system and they have their own data privacy, et cetera. What we found the best things to focus on within that system is to work with billing, claims follow up, and scheduling. So, those are the tasks that we typically handle because there's been a lot of pushback back and forth. So, we realized that, hey, you know what? You can't have everything, so you might as well have something. And that's what we found been to be very successful for us. There's maybe other companies that do more and have penetrated more into that system, but that's worked for us.
Okay. And so, particularly scheduling, because I know access is an issue for veterans, and thank goodness for the VA system because they fill a lot of gaps that the private system doesn't do very well.
Yep.
But so the scheduling, how are you helping them with that?
It's just all over the phone. So it's a lot of scheduling and following up to make sure they come back in because a lot of that has to do with patient care and how they feel. Because if they feel that they're being taken care of, they come back. And there's a lot of after patient care follow-up to make sure that they stay involved. Did they get their meds? Are they taking them? Here's your next doctor's appointment. You have to come back in. So that's a lot of how that goes. And, just picturing that of what a VA does, it's that personal connection that allows them to continue to feel comfortable to keep coming in.
Okay. That's good. And what happens if your virtual assistant contacts a VA patient and does it sense if the VA patient's not being agreeable to answer questions or to schedule? Does that then trigger for it to get to a real person to talk to that
Well,
veteran?
so yeah, yeah. So we have that side of it too is also our real virtual assistants calling the VA individual, right? The person. So we have our virtual assistants calling the actual patients.
Okay. But that's what I'm
Yeah.
asking. So if the patient isn't
Yep.
answering the questions or they seem confused or whatever's going on, does your system, for lack of a better term, I know AI can't sense something, but do they identify that they need to then get a real person on the phone with that veteran and talk to them?
Yeah, yeah. So there's an actual button you could hit to say, "Hey, talk to a live person as well."
Okay.
So it's very, very automated. And it can sense that.
All right. And what is your success rate in that? So if 100 calls are made for scheduling a patient's follow up, what percent of those are completed by the virtual assistant?
So it's pretty high right now. Like we said, AI is still trying to figure itself out. So it's pretty high. It's probably about, if I had to guess, we don't have those exact numbers, but it's about 70% that get forwarded over. So like we talked about before, AI is a pretty interesting thing right now. It's not where it needs to be, but it keeps getting better every day. And that's one of the things that I keep going back and forth with. Is it ever going to be good enough to replace somebody? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll ever get good enough to replace somebody. If you've got 5 people doing a task, I like to think that we'll get to a point where 2 or 3 of those could be potentially replaced. Not all 5. I don't see
Yeah.
that happening.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you're a fan of CNBC or Jim Cramer that does Mad Money. Have you heard of him before?
I know I have. I have heard. I haven't
Okay.
watched him in a while, but yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, he said something, it's been 2 or 3 months ago, and it stuck with me because, Jim's kind of all over the place. If he's not ADHD, he should be. Um, but I mean, he's made some awesome calls over the years too and built a very nice reputation. But he started talking in one of his shows about artificial intelligence, and he was more focused on all the current solutions out there. So, Grok, Perplexity, Gemini, all of the big systems that are out there. And he said something very interesting. He said that he actually tested the big five systems and he asked them all exactly the same question. And I don't remember what the question was. And all of them came back with answers that were close, but they weren't exact. So, it was something like, what are the top 5 companies in this industry? And they came back and they pretty much all got the same 5, but in order of rank from 1 to number 5, there were some variations from the results from these AI systems. And his takeaway was, that's impressive. AI is helpful, but until all 5 of them come back with exactly the same answer, we're not there. And I thought, okay, that's a good analogy. That makes sense to me. So from your area of expertise, what has to happen for virtual assistants to be there? Meaning that it's that level of consistency and reliability that we have with real people.
Yeah, I think the technology has to, almost. You're from Alabama, right? I'm from Connecticut, so maybe it has to go to accent-based places and just reading who's actually calling and answering the phone. Maybe that's step number one, because we test this stuff all day long, and for it to get there, I think it has to understand different areas of the country as well and how people react. It also needs to understand the age group you're speaking to, nationality you're speaking to. I think all of that and that's very difficult. I don't have the answer for any of that, but I think it's got to start thinking along those lines.
Yeah, that's a good point because we all use jargon, we all use different phrases that you would hear in different areas of the country. That is
Yep.
interesting because AI should be able to detect that based off of the pattern of speech and keywords. And I hadn't really thought about that. That's a good point, Bob. Um, it also would be helpful if it could adapt at some level to communicate in a similar fashion.
Yep.
Where, if the patient speaks slower, like me being from Alabama, then, it slows down its speech pattern as well. That would be an interesting case study to see whether or not people really stick with the conversation with the virtual assistant.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. Don't know though. I wish I knew.
Yeah, I don't think any of us know for sure. But we've got to start figuring it out because the wave is going to happen. It's kind of like when PPOs became a thing in healthcare. So you start having a PPO where you have a more limited network, you've got a higher out-of-pocket amount, those type things. And there were portions of our country that adapted very quickly to that. And there were portions that were extremely slow to adapt, but we all ended up there. And I wonder if we'll see something similar with AI in the development.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, we got to go back to hockey because I need to hear your story. And I know this isn't healthcare related, but I'm fascinated. You said you were a professional hockey player, so talk to me about your career as a hockey player.
Yeah, well, it starts back. Played 4 years in Boston University up here in the Northeast. We were fortunate enough to win a national championship, which was pretty cool.
That
And
is.
then my last year, I got offered a contract. I was drafted by St. Louis Blues in the 6th round back in '92, I believe.
Wow.
And then, I signed a pro contract, two-way contract with. Two-way contract means if you play in the NHL, you make X amount of money. If you play in their minor league team, you make less than X amount of money. So, so I played in their minor league system. I played one exhibition game, but then I'm fortunate enough to play 8 years pro, 4 years here in the U.S. and 4 years in Europe. And then decided I had to grow up and join the real world. So that's what I had to do. But 8 years I had for living in La La Land. It was good.
I bet that was an amazing experience. So Europe. So what parts of Europe were you in when you were playing professional?
I was in Milan, Italy, which is awesome. I was in Lugano, Switzerland, Core, Switzerland, and then Hamburg, Germany.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's worth it right there, just to have those experiences.
It was a good run. I mean, people say, "Oh, I wish I would have done something different." I would not have done anything different. Some of the younger mess ups you made as a youngster, of course, I would definitely want to undo, but the path I would keep the same, just because, like you said, the experiences, a lot of people don't get those experiences and the opportunity to do those. So, for me, it's been phenomenal.
That is amazing. And what is it? What do you attribute? What do you attribute kind of, and I hate to refer to it as the rise of the NHL, but it feels like, uh, you know, 15 years ago, I mean, you had a lot of hardcore fans, but now the fan base seems to be broadening. Is it
Yep.
broadening because of access to watch more games on TV? I know ESPN just did a contract with the NHL, which is
Yep.
not going to hurt. Why is it starting to become more? God, I hate to call it mainstream, but it's more mainstream than it was for sure.
Yeah, I think whoever took over marketing has done an absolutely incredible job. So, TV contracts, you had salary caps. They kept raising the salary cap. So you're getting the best of the best. They started to move away from fighting. So now every player is really good. So now they could skate, they could shoot, they could score. Tied to that with, marketing, just like any business out there, marketing and branding is everything.
Yeah, interesting. I'm still angry that Stamkos left the Lightning,
I
though.
know, me too. Me too. So
Oh, the guy had been with the Lightning exclusively in his career. I do not understand how Tampa Bay let him get out of
well,
there.
you have to be a little stung because Florida's won it two years in a row, and it hasn't been Tampa.
I know, but it's hard to argue with Bob's skill though back there in the net. I
Yeah,
mean,
I know.
he's pretty darn good, as much
He's
as I
unbelievable.
hate to admit it.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. But hey, Tampa had a good run though, and they'll be coming back. I mean, think about that. A lot of the top players are going to want to sign in Florida because of the tax incentives to play there and live there.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I do remember though, how many years has it been since I can't remember even which network it was. They decided they were going to save the NHL so that it could become popular on TV. And they came up with the technology to put the little glowing light around the
Oh,
puck so that,
yeah.
I mean, you remember this happening?
Oh, that was a tough one. Yeah, I remember when they shot the pucks around the boards and you're following that glowing light. I'm like, what is this? Yeah.
Yeah. And it lasted, I mean, it was like less than 3 months because
Yeah.
it didn't cause, non-hockey fans to suddenly be interested in hockey. And it absolutely ticked off the hardcore fans.
It did.
But
It did.
it's a fascinating sport. Yeah, I caught myself. It was probably, I've always been a football fan. I know we were talking about that before we started recording.
Yeah.
But I've always been a big football fan, very hardcore. And about 2 years ago, there was, it was about this time of year, there was an NFL game that was a pretty good matchup that was on Thursday night. And I sat there and watched the Lightning play instead of watching the NFL. And I started laughing at myself that, I was like, wow, Tom, you're evolving. I mean, this is big. Because I had started out just being interested in hockey when there wasn't anything
Yeah.
else to watch. And now I've turned into, I always know when the Lightning are playing, and as many games as I can catch, I try to catch. So that's pretty
Nice.
cool. Well, good. Well, Bob, this has been really interesting. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
some time and insight and knowledge with us. Anything else you think might be interesting to our listeners before we wrap this up?
No, just to wrap it up, I would say if you guys have any questions at all, we have a virtual assistant service for 10 plus years, and it's really helped offices become more efficient. Also, it helps with the four things that we talked about. burnout, admin overhead, etc. So reach out to us if you have any questions. Go to our website, which is revaglobalmedical.com. You want to sit with our team, sit with me, let me know, and we could walk through how we could best work with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, Bob, is I know you're kind of like I am, that I will give away a ton of free consulting just because, number one, I'm very interested in helping other organizations. But number two, I love hearing problems and coming up with solutions. And I know that you've got a great reputation in the industry as being an excellent consultant, that if you've got a problem you need to solve or an idea about something that you want to fix within your organization, or you just want to explore what's possible, I know you invest a lot of time in others to help organizations figure that out. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Healthcare Badlands Podcast. As always, please like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you have suggestions for topics or guests, please email those to podcast@badlands.pro. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. Some information shared may include fictitious names. The opinions expressed are solely those of the host and/or guests and are their own and not reflective of the opinions of others or our sponsors. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of the Healthcare Badlands Podcast. Until then,